It puts the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again. This ground is very well trodden. The Silence of the Lambs has been out for over 30 years. It won all 5 of the major Oscar categories. It's far from underrated or ignored by the public or academics. Nevertheless, I wanted to share what I find most compelling about the film. This line, delivered by Hannibal Lecter, is the thesis statement of the film.
Don't you feel eyes moving over your body, Clarice? And don't your eyes seek out the things you want?
The Silence of the Lambs is in some ways a film about vision, being seen, seeing. And in that sense, I think it's a masterclass in visual storytelling because of a choice that pervades the film, the subjective camera. Often, when Clarice is in conversation with another character, instead of opting for the more traditional over-the-shoulder shot, Demme has the characters look directly into the lens. And effectively, that puts the audience firmly in Clarice's shoes, and sometimes makes for a really uncomfortable viewing experience. Some of the most iconic examples of this, of course, are with Hannibal Lecter. Anthony Hopkins has this piercing, unblinking gaze that makes me squirm in my seat when I watch it. But honestly, I find myself squirming in my seat at various points in the film. Everywhere Clarice goes, she's being observed and sized up. When she exerts power, she's looked at with contempt. She's coddled by her supervisor. She's objectified and fetishized by too many men to count. The film constantly visually reminds us that Clarice is surrounded by men, constantly observed by men. The irony, of course, is that these men, more often than not, are in law enforcement with Clarice and are baffled and horrified by a figure like Buffalo Bill, who sees women in terms of flesh. But at the same time, the viewer is incessantly reminded that Clarice is being seen in terms of flesh. And that probably plays into why both Clarice and Lecter say that Buffalo Bill is not, in fact, a transgender woman.
There's no correlation in the literature between transsexualism and violence. Transsexuals are very passive.
Billy is not a real transsexual, but he thinks he is. He tries to be.
Despite how it looks, and despite how the media portrays him, his fetishization of the female form is just not the same as what it means to be trans. Despite the fact that this point is made explicitly in The Silence of the Lambs, the film and many others have contributed to heinous and false stereotypes about trans women, which, to be clear, I'm more apt to blame media literacy and previously existing stereotypes more than the film itself. The reality is that trans women are far more likely to relate to Clarice's experience being ogled and fetishized than a character like Buffalo Bill. As Clarice says in the movie, there is no correlation between trans identities and violence, and yet the idea pervades. Lindsay Ellis and Natalie Wynn from ContraPoints have both talked about how The Silence of the Lambs impacted public perception of trans women, and I love them. I love them. So yeah, The Silence of the Lambs is very much about visual fetishization and how gender impacts perception.